At what point in time in Jewish history did the Jews begin using sundown to begin the next day? I know it was sometime after Yeshua was killed because John makes it clear that they had the correct timing then. It's probably in the 4th century when they perverted the rest of the calendar. I do not know for sure. I do know that they have perverted nearly every truth that in my Father's words, so I have stopped taking anything that they observe for granted as being truth. After all, it would be pretty foolish of any of us to continue to follow a source that has been proven to mislead us on so many other things. The fact will always be found in Yahweh's word that he gave us to live by. The word expresses all truth and exposes all lies. This is a very serious subject, and it must be addressed with the spirit of fearing being wrong, because much hinges on being in agreement with our Creator. If we are wrong, we are living a lie. Then we are accepting Satan as our father, because he is the father of lies. Today I will examine the 2 places in Scripture that it appears to lend credibility to the sundown to sundown theory of when the day begins and ends. And yes, it is a theory. Nowhere in Scripture does it say the day begins at sundown. In several places in Scripture it says that the next day begins at dawn. But if we have preconceived ideas applying the instructions of the Day of Atonement to be our guide for all days, or if we do not examine closely what it said in Genesis 1, that the evening and the morning were the first day, we can get sidetracked and be led astray. Why is it important? I can tell you why. Having the correct time for our Creator's appointed times is what defines whether or not we're walking in the truth. We cannot even know the timing of Passover without possessing the truth on this subject. Plus, we change our Creator's instructions and we're living in sin if we have it wrong. Start off in Genesis 1. And Elohim said, "Let there be light," and there was light. And Elohim saw the light, and that it was good. And Elohim divided the light from the darkness. And Elohim called the light day, and he called the darkness night. And the evening and the morning were the first day. The phrase "and the evening and the morning were thee" is repeated for days 2 through 6 as well. We have all 6 words in question used in these 3 verses: light, darkness, day, night, morning, and evening. 5 of these words that are used here have clear definitions in the way they're used through Scriptures. But the word translated to evening is used in a mixture of ways. This word is the Hebrew word areb. Let's assume for a minute that it meant sundown. And I'll prove in a moment that through Scriptures that it does not, at least not by itself. If it meant sundown, then at noon each of these first 6 days, the day would end, because the word used for morning is boker, which means the morning in the Scripture. No, our Scripture does not leave out the afternoon in each of these 6 days. Instead, he leaves out the night. As with all things, it is simply a matter of believing his word. Moses records here, "On the afternoon and the morning were the first day." He's speaking of the daylight portion of each day, plain and simple. I said I would prove this, and I will. I would Scripture do so because it's the only truth. The word is truth. Granted, there are a lot of translation errors put in place by man to support their erroneous ideas, so we must be diligent. We must make sure that we have the spirit of counsel and the spirit of understanding and of wisdom and of knowledge from our Creator. And these are freely given to us if we would just cry out to him in truth and agree with him to walk in the truth, whatever his truth is. Here are the 6 words. Light, Strong's number 216, or it means light. Darkness, Strong's number 22, means darkness. Day, Strong's number 3117, means day. It can mean a period of time as well, but it's just used as day throughout Scripture so many places. Night, Strong's number 3915, means night. It's away from the dark. Morning, Strong's number 1242, and boker means morning, or dawn, early in the morning some places. Evening, Strong's number 6153, ereb, they have it as meaning dusk. Scripture teaches this definition is incomplete. It can be any time from midday until dark in how it's used in other places. Does our Creator want to confuse us? No. If he wanted to say, and the night and the day were the first day, he would have simply had Moses record, and the night and the day were the first day. The first thing he did was say, "Let there be light." And the darkness was already here. People want to twist this as well and say, see, the darkness was created first. No, it was already here. In verse 2 we read, "And the earth had became without form and void." It was in a state of destruction because of an earlier event, but that's not the subject matter of this video. It is a matter of stepping aside from our preconceived ideas, from what we've been taught, and simply believe the words of our Creator and his servants. Strong's number 1961 is used twice in each of these exchanges. It means to exist, to be or become or come to pass. So these verses actually read something like, "The afternoon came to pass, the morning came to pass, day 1. It really is that simple. I'm going to show you how Scripture makes it even more simple by using the timing of the death of our Messiah. In fear of being wrong on this, I went through the 134 times that the word areb is used in the Old Testament. In doing so, I applied the principle of of its meaning from midday to dark, and it fit every time. Trying to make it mean at sundown does not fit in several places. Of course, it does include sundown. This is obvious. And when used with other criteria, it can certainly mean sundown. Leviticus 23:5, in the 14th day of the first month at even is Yahweh's Passover. The enemy has done a number in this verse. This is also sure proof that Ron Wineland and others are false. They refuse to let go of an error and twist this verse to defend their error. In doing so, they have led many into believing a lie. At is the Hebrew word here, bain. It means among or within, and it can mean other places the way it's used between. The lie is that they say this verse on the 14th day of the first month is between two evenings, is Yahweh's Passover. First of all, where did they get the word two from? Or they might mislead it by saying between the evenings, implying the two evenings. They do this to make their belief fit Scripture instead of simply believing Scripture. The sickness of man is incredible. This verse actually says from the Hebrew, 14th day, first month, within or among, afternoon, Yahweh's, and Passover. This verse itself does not give us all of the instructions for Passover. The rest of the instructions are recorded elsewhere. This verse simply tells us that the Passover was to be killed, when it was to be killed. It was to be killed on the afternoon of the 14th day of the first month, and as we read in Exodus 12, and ye shall keep it up until the 14th day of the same month, and the whole assembly of the congregation of Israel shall kill it in the evening. Bain Areb again. So, Numbers 9, we read, we're going to add another dimension to it here, because in the 14th day of this month, at evening, Bain Areb still, ye shall keep, that's a lie, that's not what that word means, we'll see here in a minute, in its appointed time, according to all the rites thereof, according to the ceremonies thereof, ye shall keep, again, that's a misrepresentation, when we look at that word 62:13, and Moses spake unto the children of Israel that they should keep, same word, the Passover, and they kept, same word, the Passover, on the 14th day of the first month at even, Bain Areb, in the wilderness at Sinai, according to all the Yahweh commanded Moses, so did they keep, the children of Israel. This word 62:13 is used 2,629 times in the Old Testament. It means to prepare or to make ready or to dress, as in dressing the lamb out or the goat out, or to perform. The 14th day is the preparation day of the Passover, lamb or goat, in the afternoon. The simple proof is, when did Yeshua die? Scripture tells us plainly. I don't know one person who disputes the fact that he died at approximately 3 p.m. on the 14th. This video, the time allowed in these videos will not afford me to go over the 134 uses of the word Areb, but I suggest you do so. Here's just one for your information. Jeremiah 6. Prepare ye war against her, arise and let us go up at noon. Woe unto us, for the day goeth away, for the shadows of Areb, evening, are stretched out. Do you have shadows after sundown? A simple fact is they were to kill the Passover in the afternoon of the 14th and prepare it to be cooked and eaten in the night of the 14th. All we have to do is just believe Scripture instead of trying to twist it to fit the sundown to sundown theory. Another fact is, this is exactly when our Passover, the Messiah, was killed and prepared for the tomb. How the enemy has deceived so many is he has perverted this teaching by teaching us to believe that the Last Supper was the night of the 13th and it was eating the Passover lamb. It was not. Yeshua clearly instituted some instructions that night of the 13th to his disciples for the future, but he did not die on the wrong day. Another proof that it was not the Passover night and the eating of the lamb is Yeshua went out that night to the garden. If it was the Passover night, he would have stayed in his gates as he was commanded to do. Another proof is John 19. When Pilate therefore heard that saying, he brought Yeshua forth and sat down in the judgment in the place that is called the pavement, but in the Hebrew, Gabbatha. And it was the preparation of the Passover. About the 6th hour he said unto the Jews, Behold your king. Was John misled about when the Passover was? I doubt it. After all, he was an eyewitness. The facts line up as they always do, but there is always another attempt by the enemy to thwart the truth, and this is in the mistranslations of Matthew 26. I won't get into the Luke account of this story because it's not necessary. Luke was not an eyewitness to the event, and because he was a follower of Paul as well. So Matthew 26. Now the first day of the feast of unleavened bread, the disciples came to Yeshua, saying unto them, Where wilt thou that we prepare for thee to eat the Passover? And he said, Go into the city to such a man as say unto him, The master saith, My time is at hand. I will keep, that's a lie, it's not there, the Passover at thy house with, another lie, my disciples. And the disciples did as Yeshua had appointed them, and they made ready the Passover. Now when the eve was come, he sat down with the 12. So certainly the way this is worded, it certainly would appear that that's what they were going to eat, the Passover lamb. But to prove there's translation errors, first we'll just look at verse 17. We read that the first day of the Feast of Unleavened Bread had came. This is obviously a translation error because I think almost everyone listening to this knows the first day of unleavened bread is the 15th, which is 2 days after this exchange, which is on the 13th. And I also don't think any of you would deny that Yeshua is giving them this instruction on the 13th. I will keep is not even in the text. It's Strong's number 4116. It can meet a very wide variety of applications, but to agree, to appoint, to ordain, you can look up the word, but it's certainly a stretch to say, put I will keep, as he was going to be the one keeping it with him. And with is also a stretch if you once you believe the truth. It can mean after or follow or hereafter. So what happened in this discussion on the 13th? One of his disciples asked Yeshua, because the feast was almost there, where will we prepare to eat the Passover? And the preparation is on the 14th. This is on the 13th when the disciple asked him the question. Did they go and check on the arrangements? Is Matthew saying that they went that day to appoint the place that they would make ready the Passover the next day, the preparation day? Or is he saying that they went and prepared it on the 13th, the actual Passover? Yeshua knew that the time was approaching for his betrayal. The disciple asked him where they would prepare the Passover, and Yeshua told him and sent them to make the arrangements. Yeshua had some of this all worked out to some degree because the place that he sent them to, the man had to have picked out the lamb and set it apart 3 days earlier on the 10th to be in agreement with the scriptures, and he would have certainly had to know for the 12 of them to eat it how big of a lamb to have set aside. And Yeshua was certainly preparing the disciples as well that night on the 13th, giving them all of the incredible last night instructions that he gave that were recorded in John's chapters 13 through 17. And then they arrived at their destination at the night of the 13th, and they sat down to eat what we know of as the Last Supper. To believe otherwise is to say that John recorded it wrong, and either one, they prepared the Passover lamb on the wrong day, or two, he being our Passover was killed on the wrong day because he was killed on the next day. None of these two are possible. Unless, of course, you design a counterfeit calendar system, which is exactly what Satan has accomplished. A calendar system where you can try and say that the night begins the day. Therefore, the end of the 13th is actually the beginning of the 14th, and the lamb was to be killed then, after sunset. Therefore, the Passover is during the night of the 13th, since after all, it's really the 14th, and then stretch that Yeshua died before the 2 evenings. Therefore, he still died in that 24-hour period of time, so it's okay. Oh, don't forget, the word 2 is not in the instructions. Believing that the night of the 13th is the beginning of the 14th means that you have to also believe that Israel fled Egypt on the Sabbath because the 15th is a Sabbath. Yeshua clearly told us, pray that our flight be not on the Sabbath. He's referring to something different, but the same principle applies. Knowing the truth that makes it clear that since they left at night, it was after the daytime portion of the 15th, which also proves that the Sabbath day means what it says. It is the Sabbath day. It does not include the night. It is not a 24-hour period of time. Yes, Satan's calendar system sure does make things confusing, and our Creator's calendar system sure does make things simple. It's just a matter of believing him instead of trying to make things fit into our beliefs. The truth is pure, all dots connect, and it is simple. Translations of men have perverted and hidden the truth. I'm running out of time allowed here for YouTube, so I will divide this into 2 parts and conclude with discussing the Day of Atonement in part 2.